This episode of the Restoration Today podcast is brought to you by Albi. Are you tired of switching from app to app to accomplish simple tasks for your restoration business? With Albi's all-in-one software, you can stay ahead of the game by unlocking a comprehensive platform that sets you up for success, helping you keep track of current and future jobs and becoming a unified front with your field and in-office teams. It's time to join the future, ditch the multiple apps, and go for a streamlined software catered to your unique business needs. Book a demo today at albiware.com. This holiday season, Albi is doing a special promotional gift for your first month free. Upon activation, receive a $1,000 gift card. Again, that's albiware.com. This episode is also brought to you by SteriMist. Whether it's a residential or commercial space, SteriMist is your go-to solution for a mold-free, toxin-free environment. Don't let mold and mycotoxins compromise your health. Take control with SteriMist's IHP disinfection technology. Visit steramist.com today to learn more and integrate SteriMist into your remediation protocols. That's steramist.com, innovating for a safer world. Hey, restorers, thanks for checking out this episode of the Restoration Today podcast. This is a podcast that's been a long time coming. I'm actually shocked that I have not had this person on yet, but better late than never. I am joined by Kevin Dooley. He's north of the border from me, although I'm pretty close to Canada too, but he is from Kahi, but Kevin's been involved in the industry for a while, has restoration companies, and has been involved in a number of capacities. So I'm excited to have Kevin here to talk about innovations in the industry. You know, Kahi specifically does asset tracking, that kind of stuff, but Kevin knows way more than that about the industry. So Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about Kahi, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Where do I start? So I've been in the industry since I was 14 years old. My dad's a restorer. So started out on the weekends, spring break, summers on the flood truck, and ultimately made it a career. Here we are, of course. And so the last 20-ish years full time, I started my career supporting restoration contractors right across Canada and the US, mainly with equipment rental and emergency climate control. And then in some local markets up north, we provided full service mitigation and abatement services as a sub as well. And so I cut my teeth, for many years now doing that. And because of that business, we had a pretty extensive fleet of equipment to help support the contractors that we worked with. And like most restorers that we encounter, we had the same kind of struggles as it related to tracking our fleet and trying to find a technology that would, serve us well and also be affordable. And when we first started considering Kahi, before it was even called Kahi, we were just looking at things and realized that there was no real great solution out there, at least from our vantage. And, being that I'm a bit of a tech-minded operator and what have you, and having some good relationships with engineer folks, we started beta testing hardware and proving out if the tech was actually good. Because to be honest, Bluetooth-enabled sensors were still not very good, 5+ years ago. And so anyway, we went through that testing and proved it out and seemed viable, and kind of birthed Kahi about 4-ish years ago. And in earnest, we've been kind of publicly into the market now for about 2 years, and things are going pretty strong, very strong.
Okay, so talk a little bit about how far Bluetooth technology has come, because I think the industry might have been a little slow to adopt. Well, our industry, sorry guys, slow to adopt technology in general, right? Yeah. But you mentioned that Bluetooth has come a long way. So what's the difference between the technology today versus maybe what it was like in a pre-pandemic world?
Yeah, well, 5 odd years ago, give or take, the beacons that were available at the time, like these little pucks here, these devices back then, they didn't have great range. They had difficulty kind of going through wall assemblies and things like that. So they weren't very trustworthy, if you will, from a data collection perspective. So they've come a long way. Bluetooth 5 was kind of right in that kind of zone when it started to come out. And I guess just like everything, it's advanced along, and now
Yeah.
it's now it's around then until up until now, it's now at a point where a lot more reliable gateways. There's a whole host of different particular hardware types, from your phone to actual different, we call them gateways, but like mini computers that can sense these things and track them accordingly. So it's super affordable. There's for restorers, there's a meaningful number, generally speaking, for most of them, because the beacons are still, although they're relatively inexpensive, anywhere from 11 to 15 bucks, typically is kind of the zone for these things. They still add up when you got thousands,
Sure.
right? And but once you've got past the initial purchase, the subscription, the software, generally speaking, at least I know with us, is quite affordable. Yeah.
What does it look like on the management side of all of this for a restoration company? Like, who's watching over the software to make sure that equipment really is being tracked and taken care of, and kind of like the best practices for if you're implementing something like this into your company?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a wide ranging
Yeah.
question, if you will. So we have a couple different personas. We have like Restoration Ronnie, we call them. So the Ronnie type is the operator that's still heavy in the day-to-day operations of the claims. Owner operator, maybe still project managing to a certain extent, or at least got his fingers in the pie, so to speak. So in that regard, in an operation of that size, which is usually our ideal fit, is typically a vehicle of five, a fleet count, sorry, I should say, of five to 5+ really. But the Ronnie types are in that 5 to 20-ish size of vehicle
Yep.
fleet,
Yep.
right? And so in that scenario, on the far scales of 5 to 20, it kind of varies, obviously, because at the 5, the owner is still heavy in. When they start getting towards the higher teens, they might have operations manager or a mitigation manager, things like that. So when you speak to that type of an entity, it could be the owner itself if they're on the smaller scale. And when you start tipping the teen side, then it's the branch manager. There might be an admin person that's assisting from a billing perspective.
Sure.
Some operations will involve their estimators or project managers if their part of their role requires compiling the equipment and really the mitigation piece of the invoice. So they'll use Kahi, to validate what equipment was actually deployed to a job, check a reporting to then match it, pull it, supplemental data on the backside of whatever sheet they're writing or invoice they're curating. And then if you have a warehouse persona or logistics person, typically they're going to start cresting on the 20+ side of the vehicles. Vehicles is a good benchmark. Then Kahi starts to enable things like scheduled service automation, repair automation, inventory control, that kind of stuff. And usually that'll kind of delve into a role in that side. So we touch a few different components of the business given size. And then once you get into like the big corporates, then you have a whole different ball game, right? Branch
Yeah.
managers and CFOs and COOs, et cetera, and they're all touching the software from different perspectives. We have macro reports that can give kind of a health status, if you will, of the entire operation, so you can see what's happening at the branch level across the entire org. Resource planning, it's a little bit more sophisticated on that side, but we're playing with small folks right up to the biggest of the big.
How are you seeing innovations like Kahi move the needle on restorers trying to get paid in a more timely fashion? How is it helping with like overall documentation and process of getting paid by the carrier or TPA, whatever it may be?
Yeah, so for us, we're just cresting into that kind of realm now. So the obvious ones are, of course, reports that generate GPS timestamps reports for the assets that were deployed to a job. So that's good backup documentation to validate what the restorer is actually charging for said services. So that's nice. And then we're moving into more on the data collection side, centered around how equipment behaves. So I won't dive too much into the weeds on it unless you'd like me to, but we're building out environmental sensors that we've custom designed, made here in America. And the very, very short story on it is the way we've gone about building our platform. We've been very methodical, I guess is one way to say it. It's not the right word I'm looking for, but we've been very methodical and deliberate on cataloging the entire industry's equipment that's out there, from the stuff that's overseas to the stuff that we see here, everything. And we control the catalog, not the restorers that use Kahi. And we did that intentionally because we want to make sure that there's data integrity across all users. So things like the compressor size, the CFM, the pints per day, power specs, so on and so forth, exactamy codes, what have you. We control all those specs. So when you actually inventory in our system, which is also unique, which I can share if you like, all those details will marry on and bolt onto the individual asset record, which will then start to drive these, downstream processes. So when you look about equipment readings specifically and what's happening in the chamber, when you provision our enviro sensors that we're launching here shortly, it will be a more of a matter of fact position, right? So when you're collecting the readings coming off the equipment against the ambient in the chamber, against the unaffected HVAC system and all these things, Kahi will bring all that into its system, ingest it, and then we'll be able to help drive operational process from the operations perspective, both at the field level for the technicians, so they can make better decisions. And then as an operator or a manager, stepping back out and then looking across all jobs and addressing any potential problem type files that might be occurring, or how to optimize and tweak these jobs. That's one angle and one perspective. But then you look at it from the carrier side or the client side, and then how did our, in case of TPAs or program work, how did our supply chain, or how are our suppliers across the supply chain performing? So there's some interesting metrics that the carrier side and even, consultants and what have you want to have a view into. And I guess the short story, I've been kind of saying this a little bit more, but my MTP, massive transformative purpose, is to enable claims transparency. And so I've been shouting that a little bit loud in social, as you might have seen, but enable claims transparency is my MTP. And that's kind of where we're heading with the enviro sensors. And I think with transparency, my hope is that it'll start to smooth out some of the friction that restorers face in claims work and what have you.
Yes, I like that. That's a huge deal. So, okay, so talking about technology a little bit more, and one of the pain points that restorers talk about is the lack of integrations or true integrations, or oh my gosh, I have to have all these platforms to try to get this documentation together for the carrier or whatever it may be. So kind of what's your viewpoint on integrations and what needs to happen in the technology space in the industry in general, and then also talk about Kahi and the moves you've made to help that integrate with some of the big players in the industry, what you can say and what you can't say.
Integration is key, of course. A lot of my counterparts that don't, owners or C-suite level folks that are in these other tech companies are, trying to catch up. I know, like Dash, I think it's public knowledge now, but CoreLogic has announced that they're building up their digital hub or digital alliance. I'm sorry, Dash, if I misspoke on how that is, but they're moving towards some level of openness to integrate, which I think is fantastic. And Circle obviously has been shooting that out loud for many, many years, and we're still in its infancy. Truthfully, I think there's been a lot of job management field service software entities. There's half a dozen, maybe closing in on close to a dozen now, that have been around for some time, and they didn't really build in such a way to be API and open and connected and all this stuff. And I think now they're playing a little bit of catch up, which is at least good from the sense that we're moving in that direction. But there's not a lot that has happened truthfully there. Speaking for us, we've done some pretty interesting stuff. I don't know if I should be plugging. I don't want to make this
Go
a
for it.
sales
No, go for it.
call, but we've gone fairly deep with Encircle, and we've done some stuff to allow data to flow between our system and theirs, and that's deepening, which is promising and super interesting. I think that'll be great for the market. And we've had similar conversations with our job management systems as well. So it's just time. But I think as we kind of look, putting the sales pitch, or at least try not to be too salesy, just looking from a restorer's perspective, as we move into the future and things become more competitive, and transparency is being pushed on a higher level, integrations is going to be the enabler that allows it. Restorers are going to be, because things are going to continue to be competitive, the edge and the opportunities are going to be in those that can find areas to reduce their SG&A, right? Or even on their COGS side, the cost of goods sold. So one or other side, you need to figure out how to sharpen it up as much as possible. And I think tech eventually with these integrations will enable some of that to keep costs down and or find margins so they can be viable and what have you. So yeah, there's a lot to cover that.
There is. Okay, so talking about the industry as a whole, I know that you pay attention to a lot and have your finger on the pulse of the industry a lot. So what do you view overall as the biggest challenge the industry is facing right now?
I actually think it's a lack of transparency, if I'm being honest with you.
And a transparency between the contractor and the carrier, the contractor and the homeowner in general?
I think it's generally with the carrier, if you're, ultimately they're the ones that are typically paying the bill.
Yep.
Excuse me. So, there's a lack of trust, right? So, we've talked about this, you and I, before. We've had these conversations online. It's a constant theme in the social groups and what have you. And fundamentally, there's a lack of trust between the carriers and the contractors. And, given the fact that you can walk into any particular claim, and in theory, the scope should be generally the same. Why do we get, if 100 different contractors went into that job, why would we get 100 different results or 100 different prices to said job? Now, let's stick to scope, actually. Why is that? And so that then, just by that default, that's, I think, where a good portion of a lack of trust starts to step in. So how do we as an industry start building that trust back? And I think that's through transparency. And I don't think the service providers, contractors should be scared about it. I know I'll probably get some blowback on that perhaps, but I don't know. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think any chance for stores to get paid faster and more in full or whatever that may be,
Yep.
There does need to be some needle moving in that area. What's your take on AI? Where are we going with AI? And that was a new trend that came up in the state industry report this year. Yeah, people didn't even mention it last year. I think people were starting to talk about it, but we don't really know. And now everyone is talking about it. You can't go to a single conference or anything without that being a topic. So what I'm curious, especially from the tech space, what's your take?
Yeah, so Chat GPT is kind of like made this en vogue, and it's got a ton of power and potential for sure. So I think that's, because of that specifically, I think that's why it's like, and it's been just cheerleaded on the broadcast waves and all mediums for the last 12 or so months. Specific to us, I think there's going to be some interesting things going on for sure. I definitely know in our little sphere and what we're doing, like, looking at how equipment behaves from region to region, assessing the data off of, what I spoke about earlier, and then using that data to help drive better operational processes is going to be an AI-driven process for sure. And there'll be a whole host, but until the data can be trusted, frankly, in our space, it's going to be difficult to deploy AI en masse. So, when restorers are looking at the tools that they're using and how they're using it, and what's feeding into their tools, how do they trust that data, or how do they ensure that the data is clean and accurate? And I think we can help in that regard, but they also need to be mindful on that, whether if a human is putting it in,
Yeah.
right? And then not only that, the tools that you're choosing to run the company, are you able to leverage that data in some form or fashion and extract it out to put it into another tool perhaps, or connect to another tool perhaps? So restorers need to be mindful of that, but it's all about the data collection and trusting the data for sure, because without it, like, it's kind of BS.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, anything else that you want to add that we haven't talked about? Be industry related, Kahi related, anything at all whatsoever. People who are listening, you can check out kahi.io, I believe is the website. If you want to check out more, you can learn more there, and you can find Kevin anywhere. Go on Facebook and start searching. There will be conversations everywhere. I mean that in a good way. But anyway, yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I'll share something pretty cool that we're doing in a few months.
Okay.
So we have in our Toronto location, we have roughly 10,000 square foot warehouse and a 3,000 square foot ish office. We're converting it into a full on training center with an ESD flood house. Awesome. But the cool thing is so we're fitting it up. We're spending about $500,000 in beautifying this facility. And we decided that, I think I'll circle back to you on this, and maybe we can chat about it on a later call. But right now, tentatively speaking, March 11th, we're going to flood the whole darn thing, office, warehouse, the whole shebang. We're going to do a real commercial drawing specialist class, but like run it as if it's a large loss project. And so for any restorers that want to get a real experience with desiccants and heat drying technology and some different stuff, we're going to bring in T&M Pro, Greg and his team. We'll bring in Encircle and some other tech partners as well to like run it like a true loss and play with the gear, do the extraction, the full shebang. I don't think it's ever been done in the industry. And so we want to spice it up a little bit and do something cool. So
that is really cool. Keep me posted because I'm within driving distance of Toronto. So
we'd love to have you up, and we'll do a full media blitz, and we're going to record it all and do some pretty interesting things. And so that's a little sneak peek. We'll chat some more. I'd love to have you up for sure.
Good sneak peek. That's really fun. And when I think about the flood houses that I know in the industry, they're nothing like that. So that's good experience, especially because everybody wants to be doing commercial work. So the chance to do like hands-on training for that's big deal.
Yeah, well, to run it like an actual job. So we'll set up a whole T&M workflow. Part of the class includes all that stuff, but we'll kind of like real world it, and then obviously setting up the equipment and kind of looking at the readings and the numbers and all that stuff and doing some real calculations. It's one thing to sit in front of a PowerPoint presentation. It's another thing to actually like get in and do it. So typically that's a 4-day class. We're going to make it a 6-day because of the extra time that we're going to spend in kind of the application of it all. So yeah, more to come.
Okay, so people who are listening, more to come, and that's very exciting. Okay, well, Kevin, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for all that you bring to the industry and your innovations and all that. I know that that's greatly appreciated, and it's a pleasure having you here.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
For more Restoration Today and the latest news, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, and find the latest episodes of the Restoration Today podcast on your favorite podcasting platform.